For the second time in just over a week, a grand jury has declined to indict a police officer in the death of an unarmed man. And the protests are growing louder in cities across the nation, including here in Massachusetts. But the largest demonstrations in recent days have been in New York City, where a 23-person grand jury took less than a day to decide no indictment in the July death of Eric Garner. Police first approached Eric Garner because they believed he was illegally selling cigarettes. The grand jury saw 3 different videos showing the July confrontation between Garner and Officer Daniel Pantaleo.
I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone.
After Garner tells them to go away, officers move in, and Pantaleo is seen putting a hold on him as Garner yells out.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Garner passed out and was later pronounced dead. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide, listing asthma and cardiovascular disease as contributing factors. Officer Pantaleo told the jury he never believed Garner was in mortal danger. After the decision not to indict, Pantaleo issued a statement saying he felt very bad about the death. But that was no consolation to Garner's family.
Hell no. The time for remorse would have been when my husband was yelling to breathe.
President Obama was among several officials who spoke out after the decision.
I am absolutely committed as President of the United States to making sure that we have a country in which everybody believes in the core principle that we are equal under the law.
And Attorney General Eric Holder is promising action.
Our prosecutors will conduct an independent, thorough, fair, and expeditious investigation.
A promise he made after the Ferguson grand jury decision as well. This afternoon, Eric Holder announced that a Justice Department investigation into a separate 2012 police shooting in Cleveland found a pattern of excessive force by officers there. Joining me now to talk more about this issue is attorney Elias Rona, senior counsel at Milligan Coughlin, who has represented multiple families suing for police brutality, and attorney Michael Brennan, a former assistant district attorney who now runs his own practice. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Well, Elias, have you ever won a case against a police officer? Let's start there. It seems like the deck is stacked.
It's definitely stacked against a plaintiff in civil litigation, which is what I do at Milligan Coughlin.
Have you won?
We have not won a case against the police. We have won cases against correctional officers in the prison system, and we have cases pending that obviously we feel good about. But it is an uphill battle.
Tell us the difference, by the way, between police brutality, which seems to cover, a gamut of things, and excessive force. How do you decide which one you're going to go for?
Well, I would view them as one and the same. That excessive force and a wrongful death all have a common element, which is the level of force used more than what was reasonable and appropriate. And so whether it's self-defense or whether it was using excessive force, obviously the police can touch you to handcuff you, and they may be able to do more than that if you are showing a combative nature. But if you are compliant, then the standard of permissible force is much lower. So we view them as excessive force and unjustified killing under one standard, which is, was the actions of the officer reasonable?
Michael, a lot of people are just shaking their heads today with this one, Eric Garner. The Michael Brown case was a tad more nuanced. This one, you've got the video showing the whole sequence, and it was ruled a homicide. How is it possible that there isn't an indictment when when it's ruled a homicide?
I have to tell you, I'm shaking my head a little bit too. So, as I've been thinking about it, I guess I can understand, depending on what the grand jury heard, and we obviously in this situation, as opposed to the Michael Brown situation, where there was an awful lot of I think all of the materials have been released. But with respect to this case, you have the video, and they talk a lot about, there's been a lot of talk about cameras, and in this case, obviously, there was a camera, there were several cameras, and still there was no indictment. Yeah. I think it is very difficult for grand juries, and there's a difference. I know there's been a lot of talk, and we were talking a little bit before we started, the difference between a charging grand jury and an investigatory grand jury, and the purposes for both of them. In this situation, the target of the investigation, the police officer testified to the grand jury, and that can make a huge difference, particularly in these cases where when you're watching the video, and I'm sure that it was broken down in a lot of different ways, at least what I see by way of explanation, if I want to take that other side of things, is a situation where the chokehold ends up being a chokehold when they're on the ground, but it's a takedown at first. It's basically almost an arm bar, or that kind of a situation where they're trying to take him down. The bigger thing for me, that's it.
I mean, what?
Why?
Yeah.
And why engage?
Cigarettes?
Why engage? And that's, it's an arrestable thing, but not all things that are arrestable need to be arrested. I mean, I think in these situations, the police need to be able to step back and regroup and think about what they're doing before these things get out of control.
I mean, there's a general consensus, and you've said it too, that district attorneys they're law enforcement, so they're the prosecuting arm. They're not going to take the same hard stance on prosecuting one of their own as they are somebody else. It's just not going to happen. I mean, so knowing that going into a case, how do you approach it?
Well, certainly civilly, you assume that there's going to be no indictment. In fact, there's not going to be a grand jury. I'm involved in a case right now where an unarmed man was shot and killed by the police, and we expected fully that there would not be a grand jury, and there wasn't.
That's because the DA decides.
The DA decides within his or her discretion, but it is police and prosecutors work so closely together, hand in glove, that the system is broken in large part because you can't expect the one hand to turn around and slap the other hand.
I mean, Michael, there's got to be an independent process here. This isn't right. I mean, and people are looking at this, everybody, whether they agree with the outcomes of these last two indictments, everybody knows what we're saying is true. It's
and that's,
right.
I mean, I think that's part of the thing. And you listen to a lot of the various shows on cable television, and people are all outraged because, the prosecutor has not put their best case forward or gotten an indictment. But just let me preface it by saying, really, your job as a prosecutor is to seek justice and to do the right thing, to do justice, and to avoid an appearance of impropriety. And in these cases, we were both involved in a case, I on the criminal side, you on the civil side, of a case where the Middlesex DA's office did indict a police officer. They didn't transfer it out. They did indict it. It does happen
but he was
oftentimes. Well, he was eventually found not guilty.
They just told me the details of the case.
They eventually found not guilty. But, this was a situation where he was indicted. And they were, I can tell you the Middlesex DA's office was vehement and very, very focused and very, they fought very hard
against it.
In favor of
the
indictment.
That's pretty compelling evidence in that case.
But the general thing that I deal with as somebody that now represents not only criminal defendants but also police officers that are sometimes charged with things is oftentimes, most often, there is an out-of-county prosecutor that comes in. And that's the preference. The preference is whether, they call it a special prosecutor. It doesn't have to be something crazy. It can be, somebody from Suffolk County coming to Middlesex.
Do you have the right to ask for that when you're going for, can you say, hey, can we get an independent or an outside prosecutor?
Well, no, the civil attorneys wait until the criminal dust settles. But I'd like to just go back on the video comment that the New York chokehold case, the officers didn't necessarily know they were being recorded. And in the case that Michael just referred to, the office, there was inconclusive fortuitous surveillance camera. So perhaps better situated cameras, for example, on a cruiser. Massachusetts police do not use cruiser cams. There's no sense to that. It protects the officer, it protects the citizens. We're now talking about body cams, same thing. There should be no reason not to agree to wear a body cam. If I received a six-figure salary,
just money,
many officers do, and was given a gun with a license to kill, I would expect and welcome a camera following my actions.
And I think I just want to, on that part, I think as far as, and it may have been a misstep on the choice of words, I don't think any police officer feels that they have a license to kill, or any of the police officers that I've ever dealt with and that I know. I think most people are out there trying to do a very, very difficult job under increasingly difficult circumstances where there isn't enough money going around. And certainly, we see a lot of these things where there are all these, Army surplus things that towns end up with. But those are grant money. That's not money that police departments are really seeing. But, the other part of it is, as far as the video cameras, I think one of the concerns that a lot of police officers have is that we as a society need to be comfortable with what people are going to see when they see those things.
All right, Michael Brennan, pleasure to have you. Elias Runa, thank you so much.
Thank you.